Shopify Masters is powered by Shopify, the easiest way to sell online, in person, and anywhere in between. To get an extended 30-day trial, visit shopify.com/masters.
One of the litmus tests for me was like showing up at a Toastmasters and just giving the spiel on the product. And then I remember one individual going like, "Do you have any samples?"
Hey, my name is Felix. I'm the host of Shopify Masters. Each and every week, we learn the keys to success from e-commerce experts and entrepreneurs like you. In this episode, you'll learn what is the business model canvas and how to use it when designing a business, how to evaluate your product market fit, and why you should not say yes to any and all buyers. Today, I'm joined by Toby and Frank from Whitebook. Whitebook is a zero-waste office gear for those of us that have to write stuff down. It was started in 2013 and based out of Ottawa. Welcome, guys.
How's it going?
How you doing?
Good. Glad to have you guys on. So I talked very briefly, gave you a brief introduction about, in general, the products that you guys have to offer. But can you give us a little more details on some of the flagship products that you sell?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're essentially a producer of paper that erases like a whiteboard. And so we produce a wide variety of different products like notebooks and flip charts. And really, it's a really cool iterative brainstorming tool for techie people that like low tech solutions as well.
Very cool. And where did the idea come from? How did you guys come up with the idea of to solve this particular need?
It's a pretty funny story, actually, where we both went to the University of Ottawa. And essentially, I had this weird kind of phobia that I hated writing things down permanently on paper. I don't like to commit ideas down. I like that erasability. And so I would walk around in all my classes with this kind of laminated notebook. And people thought it was kind of weird and bizarre. And then I met Toby in a class during our master's. And it was an entrepreneurship class, actually, and our prof kind of said, pick a very simple idea that you can validate your idea. And we kind of settled on the Whitebook and kind of started it from there, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the product now, it makes a ton of sense to have a product like this, but I've never seen something like this exist until coming across your business. So what did you guys do to validate this? It's obviously a problem that you had. How did you make sure that there were other people out there that had the same problem before you went any further with creating this business?
So I think one of the infancy of kind of validation was in this entrepreneurship class, right? So we formulated kind of the simple business model canvas. And then where we define our targets and all the other stuff that goes with the canvas. And we just basically went out and got feedback to see, for example, if the education space liked it, if engineers and techies liked it, or if kind of the arts people liked it, and just kept moving on from there.
Yeah.
But one of the bigger, and I guess one of the key validation points was probably about a year into the Whitebook journey when we launched a Kickstarter, and that's when we really truly validated sales at that point.
And that was a really freaky adventure because we had one prototype at the time, and this was like a Friday afternoon, and we tried to raise about $4,000, very mediocre goal to just make a batch and see if people would buy this thing. And literally within the first 24 hours, we raised that, $4,000. And within the first month, we raised $500,000.
Wow.
So that was, for us, that was the validation. And that was really viral and organic. And it showed us that there was a clear market for something like this out there.
Yeah, certainly $500,000 is enough validation for any business. Before you got to that point, and what convinced you to even go with a Kickstarter? Like, what were you hearing from the education space, engineers? Like, what kind of feedback were you hearing from them that made you both decide, let's give this a shot and put together a Kickstarter campaign?
Yeah, initially, I think we were students at the time, so we played around a little bit with student populations, like engineers like ourselves that solve a lot of problems all the time. So we focused on them.
Pancake breakfast.
We would cook pancakes for students in the halls of the university and try to get them feedback and see if they would essentially buy our products. We also we were both professionals as well in our own kind of space, and my job was in the education space. Toby's job was in the intellectual property space. So we kind of tested with the demographics that we had access to and that we knew really well. And both sectors, we saw a lot of individuals that were like, "This is such a simple idea. Why didn't I think of that?" So that was, I think, that was to say, listen, that was something that we should try out.
One of the litmus tests for me was like showing up at a Toastmasters and just giving the spiel on the product. And then I remember one individual going like, "Do you have any samples?" And I'm like, "No." And then I just threw out, "Well, what would you pay for it?" Right? Because at that point we were still trying to validate price point. And then he's kind of like, "Well, maybe $40." So, you just get those little hints and stuff along the way that just keep you motivated and keep you going.
Yeah, so it was enough to make you guys think, why not? Let's try this out and try to launch this on Kickstarter. So when you were going out and trying to validate the product, you were specifically listening for, maybe asking if people would actually pay you for this product, or were you asking other kind of other questions to get feedback, or were you specifically focused on how much would they pay? Yeah,
for me, that was a key point. Although it kind of goes against the grain of like lean startup validation, it's not all about sales. And I remember the prof highlighting that point a couple of times. But for me, that was one of the key factors that I was looking for. And I always said, like, if some individual is looking to pull money out of their wallet or money out of their jeans for something, then I think that's a key indicator, right?
Yeah. So we ended up buying a first batch of maybe 150 of these things, and we just sold them, I think, at like $30 each to validate whether or not, people would buy this thing. And that was before the Kickstarter. And yeah, it seemed to be a price point that worked. And the other thing you got to work out is, you have a price point in mind initially, and then you need to have a sustainable business out of it. And then you're like, oh, well, there's all kinds of costs that you need to bake in. And so you kind of force to increase your product price from there as well.
Mm-hmm. I definitely want to talk about how you came about the price in a second. One thing I do like that you did was that you actually were trying to sell this before Kickstarter. I think a lot of times the campaigns that are out there either don't even have a working prototype yet, or at least maybe nowadays they're more strict, but they don't have anything they can sell immediately. But you guys went out and bought, got these manufactured or put it together so that you could actually try to sell it before going on Kickstarter. What was that process like? How were you able to get 150 of these before launching the campaign?
So this was like a minimal viable product. At the time, like we had no intellectual property on this thing. These were like laminated paper notebooks that we just went to a print shop and got done. And for us, I mean, it was a very rough prototype. The stuff wouldn't even erase really well. But at least we would validate with that minimal viable product. If somebody's willing to pay for something that's really, really rough, then if we really put the research and development into it, then we could probably validate that there's a really big market for this. And that ended up being the case.
And it was fortunate, actually, because if you look into your own network, which is what we did, right? A good friend of mine, Jimmy, actually ran a print shop. So I just went to him and said, "Jimmy, hey, dude, can you do up 150 of these?" And he did it.
Yep.
Nice. Yeah, I like that you use your network to do that. And were you getting any feedback while you were selling these 150 that allowed you or that forced you to make adjustments prior to launching the Kickstarter campaign?
It's funny because in those pancake breakfasts that we mentioned, initially the book wasn't a dry erase book. It was a wet erase book. So you've probably seen those markers that, you spray a little bit of water, like those acetate pages. So initially the book was a wet erase notebook. And we actually tried to launch it on Indiegogo as a wet erase notebook, and that failed completely as well. But it was in those kind of times when we were cooking those pancakes, and we had one prototype for a dry erase book. So it wasn't like a plastic laminate. It was actually a varnish essentially that was applied to the pages. So it would give it that dry erase kind of look and feel, that people were like, I really want a dry erase notebook. Like, this is way more convenient than something where you got to spray water. So that was actually one big, I think, pivot in our process before the Kickstarter. And we actually launched the Kickstarter with the dry erase version. And I think that actually did make a pretty big difference, because we were listening to those students that were telling us that the dry erase was something that was really important to them.
Yeah, that's great that you ran into an obstacle and you recognized that, or you saw that people weren't interested in the initial product that you came out with, the wet erase version of it. But you didn't just stop there and say this entire project, this entire idea, this entire business is a fail, let's move on. You looked to see what kind of redeeming feedback you got from those experiences and then pivoted to go into a different direction. And that's actually what took off.
Yeah, because the indicators, as you're going along the journey, right? If the indicators are still there, then you just pivot towards those beacons, man.
Definitely. And you mentioned something earlier, I think during your coursework, which was around this business model canvas. What is the business model canvas?
Go for it, Toby.
What is the business model?
It's just a simple kind of framework to just understand a very simple business that you'd like to validate. There's a lot of
So yeah, instead of having, for example, a 600 page business plan, that this thing is a simple one pager with kind of your key factors, right? So your cost structure, your target,
key partners, your value proposition is right in the middle of the canvas, and you're trying to validate
your messaging. So like there's probably 5 or 6 key elements that come from lean startup philosophy that you have on a canvas and that you constantly look at as opposed to that 600 page doc.
Yeah, and then you're just trying to validate that yes, the canvas makes sense. Maybe you plug in different audience.
Invalidate
exactly.
Invalidate each of the components of the canvas, right?
So you build little experiments, and you're like, all right, well, my hypothesis is this is going to work with these students, and then you make an experiment to see if you were actually you were right or you were wrong, and then if you were wrong, then you pivot to a new hypothesis, and you keep going from there. So it's built on like the lean startup kind of goals and.
Yeah, I'm sure it's, folks can Google and look up the canvas. Now, when you are going through this process of writing down the initial hypothesis, you mentioned that you're trying to invalidate each of these pieces of the canvas. Did you guys run into any of these along the way, and what kind of changes were you making as you were running these experiments for these different I guess factors?
Yeah, one of the key ones that pops up right away is, so we had mentioned 3 verticals that we wanted to hit up. Like one was, techies in the professional space. We named them the pros. In the education space, whether they were going to be teachers or students directly. And then another one was, we call them the arts people, like people that would, want to sketch and doodle and stuff like that. And we validated pretty quickly that this wasn't a product for like arts type individuals.
Yeah, it was more the technical problem solvers that need to visualize stuff. And that
like as a key market, like, as a beachhead. We're not saying that they will there's not a component of these individuals that don't like a product, but as a beachhead to, get a business going off the ground, it was one that we pulled off pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and are you able to invalidate each of these factors in isolation or in a vacuum, or are there situations where if one of these factors completely blows up and is completely invalidated, you have to scratch the entire, I guess, hypothesis and start from the beginning?
Yeah, I'm not sure because one of the problems also with our product is that at the end of the day, we're dealing with erasable paper. And so paper is used in so many different industries and demographics. So I think for us, it's a little harder to kind of invalidate a market completely because you can still justify that, paper is used in all kinds of demographics. But like Toby said, I mean, in those 3 different demographics, in the education space, there was a need. It was clear in the professional space, there was a need. There was less of a need from the kind of artsy kind of communities. But yeah, that's what we kind of played around with.
So I guess, the term there would be don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We scratched it off, but we didn't kill it,
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think we talked a bit about how you ran experiments to test the target market by having these pancake breakfasts and getting the feedback. Were there other experiments that you can think of that you ran to test the other factors?
I think the big one was the Kickstarter, honestly. Like literally the class itself was like 6 months. And then we were almost saying to ourselves, let's give ourselves like a hardcore 6 months to really, go knocking on doors to see if people would buy this thing. And we actually went to little, bookstores and things like that and tried to pitch it to them. Those were some of the things, but the Kickstarter happened really, really early on in our kind of validation process. So once the Kickstarter success happened, we were just thrown into this world of actually building a business. And for actually like a good year, 2 years, we were still just like still working through that huge kind of initial success, and we never really had the chance to test out our markets and stuff like that, because it's one thing to sell, you know, a one-time Kickstarter, but it's another thing to sell a sustainable business model, right? So we're coming back to our roots now and trying to revalidate some of those markets to really hash out and understand the space around, like the education space, the engineering techie space. We're coming back to those basics now, but it wasn't done really deeply in the initial stages because we had so much success. I would say too soon.
Yeah, and circling back a little bit, like even before the Kickstarter. So again, you know, if we're talking about marketing and getting stuff off the ground, a couple of things. One of the, I think for us again, well, for me anyway, in my testing was like using my network, going through my network, and we ended up making a sale with actually an IT company that used it in their support.
That's
Not
true.
A huge bulk order, but it was maybe 200 or 300 units. And even there, like and these, as Frank alluded to earlier, these were very MVP products, right? We knew the erasability wasn't great. We knew there were issues with it.
It was very hard to erase these things.
So we got these out in this IT support group, and then I was able to get a survey from them after, and you know, the survey, the response rate was good, and
that's true.
Yeah, like the survey results were pretty good, you know. So small sample set though still, but you know, so again, that was just like little indicators and stuff that we could do pretty quickly, you know. But like Frank said, the big one though was the second or the third Kickstarter.
Yeah. It sounds like very early on, at least, it was very much a work in progress throughout this entire journey, where you were selling products, so you were getting feedback on products, but you were still working through the design of this product. How were you guys able to get comfortable with, you know, just shipping the product finally, or just getting it good enough to get it out into the market?
That's so funny. So this was the big debate, right? I'm very much of a perfectionist, and Toby's a very pragmatic, get it out the door. And so if it was only up to me, I would have been like, oh, let's keep like refining it until it's the most perfect product ever. But if that was the case, we never would have shipped a product.
Right.
I think it was a nice balance between, you know, getting it to a certain point where it's like, all right, this is good enough that we can ship it out the door.
Better than good enough. I think the first few. And we did something interesting too, Felix. Like we transitioned from that laminate, from that wet solution, say like pure wet, to our own film, and that allowed us, when we did that, we could cultivate our own recipe, you know, and then we could make up our own film, and this thing comprised, you know.
Yeah, and we could really leverage Toby's background as a chemical engineer to really get that formula working on as a dryer.
And we could tweak it as we move along, right? So on a sustaining level, we could really dial in on the product, you know,
make it better.
Got it. So it sounds like the factors that were most important, you guys made sure to get right, and the others that might not have been as important or as of a big piece of your core value proposition, those are things that you can kind of figure out a little bit later along the way. Now the question then is, how do you decide which is which? How do you decide which ones are factors or you know, properties of your product that you need to get right versus others that are not as important?
The problem with us is that when I launched this Kickstarter campaign, I had promised people were going to get their books in January, and we launched this thing in December. So there was enormous pressure from like these 8,000 backers to get their stuff in January. So we didn't really about it too much. We were really pragmatically trying to think about how do we fulfill, you know, these 8,000 orders in 68 countries around the world. So I don't think we thought about it that deeply at the time, which we do more now. But
it was more about executing.
It was more execution, is trying to.
So that deadline, that pressure forced you guys to ship.
Yeah, because then we had a whole mess of other problems, right? So we were kind of geared up, like I mentioned earlier. So we were thinking, okay, Jimmy could probably ramp up his production a little bit, and if we did hit 4,000 units, he could do that, right? But I don't know the initial.
I think we did 17,000 units.
Yeah,
people had bought 2 or 3.
Was say 20,000 units. So there's no way he could do that. So then we had to find another manufacturer, and then 20. We were initially dropping these things at the post office ourselves or post office distribution centers in Canada, right? Well, there was no way that we could do that. Then we had all kinds of logistic issues, right? So we had to get a pick and pack facility online. We had to figure out, which carrier we were going to use. So
and then we had to, the business wasn't really a real business. It wasn't incorporated.
And then we're
trademarks. We got the patents.
We had trademark patents. So it was just. It was pure chaos, man.
Yeah, let's talk about this. I think there's something that I think it's like a success that leads to a lot more problems, right? Especially on crowdfunding campaigns where you have such a big surge of demand right from the beginning, and you might not even have anything figured out yet beyond just trying to get these products sold. So once the campaign was running, it had lots of success very quickly. What went into action next to make sure that you were able to fulfill as quickly as possible?
Yeah, a couple of things. Like 1, it was manufacturing. 2, it was shipping. We didn't know how to ship this thing. Yeah. And the one that we totally underestimated was customer support. When you deal with 8,000 people that want one-on-one conversations with the creators of the product, you realize there's a lot of resources allocated to that.
So. And they're a Kickstarter community, right? They're backers, and they want that's the thing about Kickstarter people. They want to be involved, and you want that. You want feedback, but your inbox, like Frank said, the inbox is just like
a lot of people. So those were some things, and at the same time, we wanted to leverage this kind of success that we were having, and we wanted to keep on selling our products. So we had our Shopify store online right after as well. So we wanted to keep on coming even after the Kickstarter was completed because we had so much good momentum going. Yeah, and I think Shopify really allowed us to do that really well.
Yeah, it was really interesting actually because we could see that the traffic was coming in, and we didn't have. I think we had the old version posted on our the real.
The original laminated one. Yeah.
And then just after the campaign ended, I remember I was like, I'm going to put this up. I'll put it up on Shopify, like our new product, and which kind of uses the same verbiage or the same language as the Kickstarter. And within 15 minutes a hit. And this is purely organic, right? There's no marketing, there's no Facebook ads or anything like that. It's just traffic coming inbound. Yeah. Inbound traffic coming in just right away. Yeah. We getting Shopify hits. So this is happening concurrently with, we were probably at the time doing 50 grand a month, maybe in Shopify sales that we had to deal with as well, compound that with our Kickstarter to get out, so.
Now, what kind of supply chain did you put in place now? So manufacturing, something you had to figure out, and you mentioned that you had to fulfill the product to 68 different countries. What was the solution to help you organize all of this?
There was a couple,
few options,
and we haven't kept a lot of those options because we iterated through, for example, shipping. We started by offloading it to a third party pick and packer based out of Montreal, and that didn't work out. Well, actually it worked out because they made a mistake initially, and instead of paying $20 per shipment to all these countries, it was actually costing them $80 to ship it in all these different countries. So their mistake ended up saving us quite a bit of money at the end of the day. But they were just not reliable at all in terms of fulfillment. And so we ended up then moving to another third-party provider. I think it was Shipwire, which was they had a warehouse in Chicago and London and Toronto as well. And so we were shipping from a bunch of different warehouses, but that was really difficult for inventory management. Let's say you send a whole whack of skids over to London, well, they're kind of stuck there if ever your warehouse in Chicago is empty. So inventory management, it was really, really
macroeconomics. Macroeconomics played a role too because Shipwire was USD, and then Canadian dollar was pretty high at the time. We were pretty much at par, and then the Canadian dollar dropped pretty quick.
Yeah,
got down to anyway. So the numbers didn't make sense after a while.
Yeah, and then we ended up
consolidating.
Yeah, and then the solution we have in place now is we have our own little shop here in Ottawa, and essentially we have a team here, and they fulfill all the orders all the day, and we're close enough to the States that we can actually get it into the U.S. system pretty easily. So that seems to be a good solution that's working for us so far. So that's the shipping side.
And internationally, we just found that trying to open up a product to basically anybody in the world, not a good idea.
Yeah, not a good idea when you're promising $5 shipping anywhere in the world initially, because you think you're going to have,
So that was a lot of issues.
So what do you do today? Do you just limit the countries that can purchase the product? How do you get around? How do you solve for that issue of exorbitant, shipping costs?
100%. So basically, we just, looked at our database, defined,
I think top 10 or something countries, and we put the actual cost of shipping to other countries. So some of the other kind of unique things that we are piloting as well are some social shipping campaigns where, for example, if groups of individuals in London, if you have a team in your office, then everybody wants to try a white book, then we program some stuff on Shopify's backend where, everybody could make their own individual order and the shipment all comes to the same location and you cut down on shipping costs. It just gets divided by a bunch of people. So we started playing around with some novel stuff like that. But yeah, those are some of the solutions that.
And then in terms of manufacturing, it was just a question of finding the right manufacturer. The initial manufacturer that we had,
totally ignored the process.
We have this is our own specific proprietary film. We have a recipe. We have a process that we need to follow in order to get the desired end product, say, and he, just wasn't doing that. So then we tried another manufacturer, and they were doing the same thing. And we have a good, third kind of kick at the can, I guess, or fourth different manufacturer that we iterated through, and we've got a pretty good relationship with the.
Yeah, I think the relationship building with your suppliers is a really, really important one, because you want to be able to trust that they're gonna produce a quality product for you. And it's now based out of Ottawa, which is really easy for quality control and stuff like that.
And they have to be sold on your vision too, right? Obviously, we're a growing company, but we're not Apple, So the account reps at these companies and stuff. And you, as an entrepreneur, right? You've got to. They have to buy into your vision and say, "Yeah, look, this is where we're going, man. Like, you guys need to come along for the ride." So.
Yeah, well, I mean, sounds like you guys got pretty beat up along the way to get to where you are today, but it speaks to your resiliency and sticking it through. And now, when you are going through this process of finding third-party logistics, well, it sounds like you have a solution today, but let's say there are others out there that are going through this process. What was important to you guys back then? Like, what were you looking for to determine if they would be a good partner or not to be your provider?
Yeah, for shipping, it was kind of, we just played around with cost. Shipping is like, nobody loves shipping. Shipping is, until we have, autonomous cars that are electric and it exponentially drives shipping costs down. I think we're still all going to have to deal with the pain of shipping. So cost is the big one. So providers that are able to provide, reliable service with a low cost. Some things that with some third-party providers was really difficult is the pick rates are often really, really high. So if, like, for example, Shipwire was a difficult situation, because if you wanted to, for example, put a piece of paper additionally in the box, they would charge you like $3-4 as a pick. And that seems to be the business model that a lot of shipping third-party shippers kind of use. For every item that goes in the box, you're paying an additional couple of bucks, right?
For a piece of paper, it costs $3 per shipment.
Oh yeah,
exactly.
Any
add-on, a pen, a freebie, a coupon, anything that go additionally in the box that's inventoried in their system, it's a couple of bucks. So that makes it really difficult. But when we migrated over to sharing a warehouse with another company, we started an agreement where it was paid per hour. So we were paying for the number of hours that the employee was pick and packing for us. So then we could really hone in and say, well, if we can make this process really, really efficient, because we had a lot more control, we had control in a warehouse, then we could really save on shipping logistics and shipping costs. And so that's what we initially did.
Yeah.
And then we kind of implemented those same strategies with our own warehouse now.
Yeah. So what we ended up, we contacted Shopify and said, contact Shopify support, said, this is what we're looking to do. Can you guys recommend, some fulfillment software? They ended up, Shopify support ended up recommending ShipStation.
Yeah, which
integrates awesome with Shopify. So we ended up using a lot of their automation rules, like Frank said, and really just dialed in on the fulfillment process.
Yeah, and the great thing about, I think, both Shopify and the ShipStation combination was that even if they didn't have a feature that we needed, we're techie enough to be able to tap right into the API and build something ourselves to make that happen. So those were kind of when we were looking for services, we were looking for stuff that gave us enough flexibility, because now we're selling with providers like Costco, Walmart, Staples as well, and they all have their unique processes to ship stuff out, which we couldn't use with a third-party provider because it's too limited in terms of flexibility. But with our own kind of shop and our own kind of features and our kind of techie brains, we were able to just hack solutions in place to be able to plug into different channels.
So that's a big lesson learned for anyone out there that's looking at third-party fulfillers, right? The thing with these guys is, and I'm not knocking, I mean, they have to make money because they're volume based. They'll get, crazy ship rates, but they have to make their money somehow. And the way that they do it is on the pick and pack, right? So you have to watch for those, how they're going to, the little value adds or negative value adds on their side.
Right.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Now, one thing you mentioned was that a lot of the time early on, you weren't able to find a reliable fulfillment partner. Are you able to determine that kind of reliability before you work with them, or is that something you only learn after the fact?
Yeah, I think you kind of meet up with them initially, and we visited a couple of people actually, and a lot of times it was like upfront. Do you have this level of flexibility if we have orders, for example, Staples that need their own custom slips and stuff like that, which is what we were dealing with at the time. And a lot of third-party providers just said, sorry, well, first they'll say, yeah, we can do it. And then when you dig a little deeper, you realize, no, they actually can't do it. And so that eliminates a whole whack of people. But I think it's just about meeting those people and getting references too.
Yeah, vetting, through your network.
Exactly. And we have a couple of companies that we deal with in Ottawa that also do pick and pack, and we kind of share, who are the good providers, who are not the good providers, and sometimes we kind of jump onto similar solutions that work really well for one particular individual. So connecting with other companies locally that might be doing the same kind of shipping logistics might be a really good idea.
Mm-hmm. And now that you use ShipStation today, you mentioned that you use a lot of the automation features. What are some of the out-of-the-box automation that maybe the tech-savvy folks out there that might not be able to hook into the API? What are some of the out-of-the-box automation that you guys like to use?
Yeah, I think it's just shipping a whole whack of orders automatically.
I see.
It just makes the process really, really straightforward.
Yeah, their batching functionality is really cool. So yeah, you batch your orders and simply print off the labels, 100 orders, 50 orders, whatever. Another thing that we have set up is we make use of a lot of automation rules that stem. So they run down from Shopify and then go into ShipStation. We pick it up. And then that, for example, the package dimensions are automatically set by the automation rule. The HS codes, just
everything you need to do for shipping is I was actually surprised when Toby kind of proposed this solution. I was like, I'm really hesitant. I don't think there's going to be one provider that has everything. And they have really everything I think you need for a really flexible solution. And like I said, like Toby said, the automation rules are a really good one, especially because
weights and dims, automatically setting the weights and dims, and then and then from there, that correlates to which packaging we use in-house. So they got a mess of different features, like right up front,
Yeah. Very cool. Now, you mentioned something earlier on about how there is a difference in either a launch or a Kickstarter campaign versus running a business that has sustainable sales. Now that you've transitioned into this new world of sustainable sales, what was that like? What had to happen to get into this new stage of your business?
Yeah, I think it's you go from a world where you're organically getting sales to a world where you have to invest time and resources into, systematically investing $1 here and you'll get $2 there. I think we're still working through that journey, because one of the things is our product is really great for a lot of different markets, and we're trying to see which market is going to be the winner sooner than later. So right now we have a lot of really good traction in the education space, with school boards, with giant flip charts that we produce. So for us, it's really like identifying the right conferences and stuff like that, the right channels. For example, like Twitter is a really good one that's conducive for teachers. So it's really building those systematic marketing efforts that will actually enable you to invest $1 and get $2 back. So I think that's the big difference between, our big one-offs initially and some of the channels that we have now. It's really, how do you kind of invest that time and effort into developing a formula, essentially, where you put X amount of dollars and X amount of time in, and you get X amount of output. And we're still, we haven't figured everything out. It's still a very much an entrepreneurial journey for us. But that's the goal, right? To make a machine out of it.
Yeah. And I think all our processes really, because if you look at the way we look at the world, the way we look at things, maybe we're a little too engineering at times, but even in a business, right? We look at a business like it's a bunch of systems, like if functionally you have your fulfillment, your logistics, your production. So then it's, the machine is still pretty loose, but, in terms of operations, like weekly, we go through, okay, we're going to dial in on this component of the business this week and this operational. So it's constantly going back, tweaking the screws and tweaking the system and just making the whole of it tighter. And the one thing that you realize is it's almost parallel, right? Like these components have to work in concert really to make a really solid business. If one gear is really loose over here, it messes with a lot of different stuff, So. And you don't know these things really when you're kicking off. You think, just make a bunch of crap on Kickstarter and there's interest and you sell it but yeah.
Yeah, you definitely have to build that system, which is what you're talking about, and be able to feed it with with time and of course capital to get it to grow. And one other thing I'd like that you mentioned was the idea that if you try to serve everyone, you end up serving nobody. Where you could be in any market where everyone needs a product like this in any industry, but you have to focus and zoom in on one particular need, one particular market. How are you able to determine this? Like, what are you looking at to say this is the market we should focus on, even though it means that we're not going to be winning, the dollars in a different market, but by focusing on this one, we can grow the business?
Yeah, I think for us,
that's interesting. So interesting that you say that.
It's pretty much what we're working on right now. We're looking at all our channels, and we look at all our revenue that comes in, and it comes in all kinds of different channels. And actually, the channels that we're focusing more on are the ones where we didn't have as much revenue as the other ones, but there's a really, really tight product market fit. And because there's a really, really tight product market fit, we think that that's going to be able to develop a more systematic, sustainable business out of it.
That, and we pivoted. We think it's easier, like in a business context, to be in a B2B world. It's more predictable. You can have better growth. So product market fit being one of them, and just recurring business, right? Because it takes time. There's customer acquisition. There's a lot of energy to acquire a customer. So, and that's a component that you have to look at. So if you take time up front.
What are you looking at to determine that it's a particular market it has a tighter product market fit?
Yeah, I think for us, it's in the education space is the big one that we're kind of looking at right now. We're seeing and we understand exactly why people are buying this. We understand the need that they have. So for us, it's the big need in the education space with our flip charts is that, whiteboards are really, really expensive, and a lot of new education strategies rely on having whiteboards all over your classroom,
particularly in math.
And so that's a really big problem that they're having in the education space, and we just fit right in. It's almost like it's a perfect match for a product. Whereas other channels, we're selling a lot of good stuff, but we don't really fully understand as much why people are buying it. We know people love it and they're using it on a daily basis, but it's used for so many different little things that it's hard to hone in on one big major product market fit.
That aha. So for example, like with the techies, is it a whiteboard? Is it eco? Is it a brainstormer? Like all these little, like they might sound like little nuances, but it really makes, like in your messaging, that really impacts. If you're trying to acquire a new customer, like that really changes the transaction, right?
Exactly.
But whereas in education, we know it's engagement. We know like teachers want this in their classroom because whiteboards are it's mistake friendly, more engaging for kids, easier to write down, and we are a disruptive solution in there. Like it's way easier to put a white chart,
a flip chart, a dry erase, piece of paper on the wall than it is to install a big giant clunky whiteboard.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're not talking about creating or changing your product. You're talking about how do you message the product?
Well, we've done both.
Yeah, you do both.
We've done both. You kind of hone in on the kind of, especially like, for example, the flip chart ones were specifically designed in parallel with the schools that were saying, well, the notebooks are great, but what if you had like a really giant, huge one that replaced our conventional flip charts that are just like you write on them and you put them in the garbage. So you kind of do that. You do the product development at the same time, and you kind of tweak the messaging to kind of figure out what they want to hear and what they want out of a product.
I think if you leave the product static, that's a mistake.
Yeah,
you got to listen and tweak it and iterate until you get. And once you get that perfect product market fit, man.
Yeah, you're rocking.
Then you're rocking.
Now, what about the differences in how you market or where you market compared between B2C compared to B2B?
Yeah, B2B is interesting because there's a lot more like your conventional sales tactics, like your salesman going to trade shows and conferences, and for the education space, for example, going to meet the people in the different school boards and the different schools. So it's a lot more like on the ground, knocking on doors and stuff like that. But you onboard a client, and then it's a recurring kind of, hopefully recurring channel for you. I think B2C is more your conventional social media channels, which
pure digital. Whereas I think when we look at B2B, it's more of a hybrid solution, right? Yeah. So you get the message out there, and then they're qualified somehow, customers qualified, and they come in, and then it's more of, like Frank's saying, more of a old school tactic where you call up, And the other thing is sales cycle is longer.
Yeah,
it's not like one hit type thing. It's definitely a longer cycle.
Yeah, like you try to understand the cycle. Like for the education space, you see the little blips at different times of year, which are not the same blips as, for example, Christmas time when you were selling via your online website to people looking for cool gifts for Christmas. It's totally different cycles, right? So you try to understand the different cycles for the different types of businesses, and you kind of go from there.
Right, because they all set their budgets and they do all their buying at different times. So do you work with like a distributor, or do you have an in-house sales team? How do you go after the B2B clients?
Yeah, the B2B clients is different. I think we do most of the stuff ourselves. We've onboarded kind of big retail partners like Staples, Costco, and Walmart by specifically making cold calls and getting meetings with the category managers and kind of using their retail channels as good venues for us. And the other stuff is just figuring out who the targets are and going to set up meetings to identify who you want to talk to, and going to trade shows. You get a whole bunch of leads, you get a whole bunch of business cards, and you follow up with with phone conversations and things like that.
And grommet wholesale. We
that was another good one too.
Yeah.
What is that?
Grommet. We sell a lot of product through Grommet. Actually, I don't know if you're familiar with those guys, but they're an online reseller, I guess, and they have their own in-house distribution as well. So we move product through them. We label them as like tier 2 retailers, so small novelty shops, but they're not ordering one-offs through Grommet. They're ordering 20 units, 30 units at a time.
I see. So you sell to Grommet, then the Grommet's clients are retailers, like physical brick and mortar retailers that are buying from their catalog?
Yeah.
Got it. Is that easy to get into? Like, what was the process of getting into a place like Grommet?
Grommet was interesting, actually, because they had contacted us a number of times after the Kickstarter, and we were doing analysis on our database and stuff, our Shopify DB and stuff. And the sales rep from Grommet was, he was like, yeah, I think your product would be really conducive for our demo. And I'm like, who's your demo? He's like, predominantly women, 40 plus, 44 to 55. Professionals, and I'm like, that's not our target.
Yeah,
sorry. And then he came back a couple of times and he's like, yeah, I think your product would do really well. So then finally I was like, okay, so let's set up a little test here. And so we got their stuff, got online, did a little video, and they launched it on their site. So, Grommet's kind of like a tier 2 Kickstarter, right? So it's kind of like Kickstarter, but more like validated products. Anyway, so it goes on their site, and it just kicked off. Yeah.
And you had to be approved to get on Grommet, or did they?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you deal with their rep and stuff like that.
Deal with their rep, and as I said, so what they do, they look at kind of novelty products, Kickstarters that have moved along, maybe a year in. So they're defined in their processes, all those hurdles that we talked about earlier, that we made it through. So the Grommet says, okay, these guys
survived.
You survived that. Looks like you can reproduce. We may be able to use you in our wholesale channels. So you're on your way to being a legitimate business. Okay, we want to work with you or whatever. SodaStream, I think, was a big Grommet product. They did a lot of stuff there. So anyway, we worked with, it was like the irony, I had the blinders on, and I'm like, the professional women, not our target, but we sold, I think I got some stats from the rep the other day, and last year they sold $500,000 worth of our stuff. So it was,
wow.
Good channel for everybody.
Good thing you eventually said yes. Now that leads me to my next question. Like, what is the harm of just saying yes to anybody and everybody that wants to come buy from you, whether they hear about you from a trade show or from you online?
Cycles,
man. Just cycles on our side, right?
Just investing time and effort. You just gotta identify the ones that you're going to have an ROI out of it, return on investment. Because we get a lot of emails all the time. Oh, can we sell this through our channels that we don't know who are? So you kind of vet them a little bit to understand if they're really legitimate or just some random Joe Blow, because you can get really caught up in wasting a lot of cycles on
distributors
and stuff. Yeah.
Right, that makes sense. Now, when you are running the business, whether it's through the Shopify site or just trying to tie all the pieces of the entire system together, are there any tools or applications that you rely heavily on?
It's funny because Toby's very much of a let's plug any app in right away, and I'm
not necessarily.
And I'm more of a hesitant. No, we got to do everything ourselves. So for us, I think most of the stuff, if we've had a little issue, I've developed a little homegrown something to kind of plug and resolve that issue. I don't know, like ShipStation is one that we heavily rely on. Zendesk for customer support is another really crucial one.
QBO.
Yeah, QuickBooks Online for accounting. Those are the big ones.
I think that's pretty much it.
And everything else is really, like I said, We're engineers, so if a service has an API, it's like you get all excited and you're like, ooh, what can I build to solve my issues?
Frank is like white book Zapier.
Nice. Piece it all together. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Toby and Frank. So wipebook.com, WIPEBOOK.com is the website. What do you guys have planned for this year? What are some of the goals that you want to accomplish this year?
Yeah, I think we have an app coming out in the next couple of weeks that'll be able to kind of digitize your whitebook and save it in in your services like Google Drive, Dropbox, I think Evernote as well. So that's coming out in the next couple of weeks. And we really want to sell more of these flip charts to the education sector. And we have some cool new versions of our notebooks coming out as well.
Very cool. Thank you again so much for your time, guys.
Awesome. Thanks.
Good one.
Here's a sneak peek for what's in store in the next Shopify Masters episode.
The cool thing about Facebook Live is that, people want to engage with you. They want to know the face behind the brand.
Thanks for listening to Shopify Masters, the e-commerce marketing podcast for ambitious entrepreneurs. To start your store today, visit shopify.com/masters to claim your extended 30-day free trial. Also, for this episode's show notes, head over to shopify.com/blog.